Welcome to the Guyana Space Center for Ariane Space Flight 96, carrying Intelsat 802. Commentary this evening is by Juan de Dalmo. Hi, Juan.
Hi, good evening to you all.
And Simon Hayes. The launcher is an Ariane 44P with 4 solid propellant boosters and 22 minutes from scheduled liftoff. All systems are go. For those of you who did not catch the last launch, the reason why Flight 96 is occurring after Flight 97, how did this happen, Juan?
Well, it happened that the satellite foreseen to fly on May the 21st, namely Intelsat 6, was decided to that launcher back to the assembly dock because it was of a side track was used for temporary parking of the first launcher, so that the new one could be transferred to the launch pad.
Well, this in fact provided new proof of Ariane flexibility, because in the past we've had launch order reversals and even changes of launcher configuration, changes of version, but this is the first on-the-pad swap. The status panel is something we shall be watching constantly through to liftoff. Green is good and means go. A red could mean problems. Juan.
Yes, this is a set of about 10 systems that are participating in the countdown, and each of them is represented here in Jupiter Mission Control by one of the deputies to the Range Operations Manager, and they are in constant link to distant control centers, each of them specialized in each of the concerned systems. And one of the distant sites is the very important Launch Control Center, also called CDL.
And the camera has taken us inside the CDL to meet Jean Rabeux, the Launch Site Operations Manager for this flight, who heads a team of experts monitoring launcher, satellite and ground facility status.
Yes, for this launch tonight, which is already the 5th this year, following the average of 1 launch per month. In fact, in the past 26 months, there have been 26 Ariane launches.
We have a generous window of nearly 1 hour for this flight, which will be opening at 8:45 p.m. local time. You will be seeing equivalent times elsewhere in the world running on your screen now. This video transmission is being beamed live to 6 sites in France, to Intelsat in Washington, D.C., the Ariane Space Tokyo office, viewers in Germany on the Space Night TV program, Schönen Abend.
Ja, guten Abend in Deutschland.
And to local viewers here in French Guiana. We're steady on green with 19 minutes to go.
And we're talking to you from Jupiter Mission Control at 14 kilometers from the launch pad.
We had the last weather report but one just a few moments ago. What was the news then, Juan?
All meteorological criteria were green for a liftoff in less than 19 minutes now.
Here we have an illustration of the extremely favorable position of the Guyana Space Center for launching eastward into geostationary transfer orbit and northward into sun-synchronous polar.
And this animation shows now the Ariane 4 version being used tonight for a flight that is expected to last 24 minutes. The first stage to burn will be, of course, stage 1, which will burn for 3.5 minutes, and it will be assisted by 4 solid strap-on boosters. The second stage will burn then for 2 minutes after separation from the first. And finally, the third stage will give the spacecraft the in-orbit velocity and will burn for 13 minutes. To feed the third stage, 2 feeding arms are right now fueling it with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen at very low temperatures. The vehicle equipment bay is placed on top for flight control, and finally the fairing containing Intelsat 802 in launch configuration.
Intelsat 802, a Lockheed Martin-built satellite identical to its predecessor 801, which went up on Ariane Flight 94 in February. It will go into geostationary orbit at 36,000 kilometers altitude at 174 degrees east over the middle of the Pacific. Now, before we see some film on the organization backing the Ariane operations, meet Terry Edwards, the satellite mission manager for Intelsat.
And Claude Kievre, who is directing the launch.
Formed in 1980 as the first industrial and commercial space transportation company in the world, Ariane Space operates the Ariane launch system developed by the French space agency CNES on behalf of the European Space Agency ESA. Ariane Space demonstrates European scientific and technical capabilities and has the backing of the space industry and banks of 13 countries. Ariane Space operates worldwide with its European headquarters at Évry, just outside Paris in France, a subsidiary in Washington, D.C. in the USA, a branch office in the Asia-Pacific zone located in Tokyo in Japan, and a launch complex in Kourou, French Guiana, with a unique geographical position close to the equator. Combined with the extremely accurate orbit injection of Ariane, this equatorial position extends the life of the satellites. Constantly adjusting to changes in international market demand, Ariane Space provides customers with a complete, personalized range of launch services based on extensive experience and a highly reliable vehicle which can place payloads of up to 4.8 metric tons with Ariane 4 and in the near future 7 tons with Ariane 5 directly into orbit. Ariane Space is engaged in a long-term production program with its European space industry partners. The manufacturing, which follows a tight quality policy, is permanently aimed at meeting customer requirements worldwide. "12,000 highly qualified Europeans are engaged in this manufacturing activity. The success of this venture is largely due to the power and cohesion of the industrial partners involved. The principal contractors are Aerospatiale, SEP, DASA, the Fiat Group, Matra Marconi Space, CASA, Oerlikon Contraves. The various launcher sub-assemblies are built in Europe and taken by sea, air and land to the Kourou spaceport.
Not mentioned in the film, of course, was the newly opened Ariane Space office in Singapore. And before we see the Intelsat film, also meet
the mission director, Philippe Roland, from Ariane Space, and the range operations manager, Thierry Bouffard, from CNES. They have both been monitoring the launch campaign and now the countdown.
Welcome to the world of Intelsat, where more than 22 satellites, 22,000 miles above the Earth, bring every nation of the world together through a continuous stream of telephone, television, and business services. Why do we use satellites for such down-to-earth communications? To answer that question, just take a look at the new generation of spacecraft we're putting into orbit. The 15 satellites in the Intelsat 7 and 8 series are taking the world of satellite communications to new heights. They are capable of delivering information faster, cheaper, and more reliably than any other communication network on Earth. As the world becomes a global village, the instantaneous exchange of information across oceans, time zones, and continents requires that communication networks be both powerful and versatile.
The Intelsat 7s and the Intelsat 8s will provide additional flexibility and coverage.
These two series of spacecraft dramatically increase telephone circuits, TV transmission capacity, and transponder power, with expanded range, coverage, and state-of-the-art services. And only Intelsat has the 30 years of experience it takes to develop, operate, and maintain this high-flying, high-tech fleet. These generations of satellites aren't just designed to meet the communication needs of today, but with almost double the lifespan of the spacecraft that went before them, they'll be bringing the world closer together well into the next century. And because they have to live so long, so far away from home, they're built as if the world depended on them. And it does. While you're watching right now, 1 million phones are ringing. Over 7 million transactions are verifying. Over 100 million people are viewing. And over $30 billion is changing hands. And it's all happening over the most reliable global communication network ever conceived, Intelsat. This very human highway of information and ideas began in 1964 with a visionary concept which led to the creation of Intelsat. In 1969, Intelsat brought the world its first truly international broadcast, spanning 5 continents and reaching 500 million viewers, with the most unforgettable event of the 20th century.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And the world watched it all, live. Intelsat is the world leader in providing its more than 130 member nations and scores of international corporate partners with the know-how to keep information flowing, business booming, and people communicating anytime, anywhere on the planet. Today, Intelsat continues to deliver the live, history-making television broadcasts that enrich, enlighten, and entertain billions of people throughout the world. And looking toward the future, one company has the vision.
The Intelsat 7 and 8 satellites provide higher power and better coverage.
The staying power, the resources, and the relationships to keep the people and the planet connected.
Intelsat is global communication.
Intelsat brings people together.
Intelsat, where the science of communication has a human touch.
Intelsat is indeed a long-standing key customer of Ariane. In fact, the company's largest customer. This is the 15th Intelsat launch on Ariane. And in fact, Intelsat was instrumental in introducing Ariane into the international launch services market with an order for 2 launches in the very early days of Ariane. Some highlights now of the launcher campaign for Flight 96. The launcher stages were brought into the port of Kourou on board the Toucan carrier vessel. This new arrangement saves time and trouble compared with the 60-kilometer road trip up from Cayenne in earlier days. The launcher campaign was completed in the standard time of 25 working days for this particular version. And the on-the-pad swap we talked about earlier had no impact on the actual campaign. This will be the 8th Ariane 44P to be flown, and the 70th Ariane 4. This will also be the 26th launch in 26 consecutive months. I mention here perhaps of the passengers on our last launch on June 3rd. Both Inmarsat 3F4 and INSAT 2D are performing satisfactorily during their in-orbit test programs. Those, of course, went up on the swap Flight 97. Launcher assembly in the dock lasts 2 weeks.
Mechanical and electrical checkout.
And we shall see in a moment the vehicle equipment bay. Here it is, the launcher brain, during integration with the 3rd stage assembly. The launcher was then rolled out to the forward zone. This happened twice, of course, for our launcher. Notice the flat top and the absence of boosters. In position alongside the tower, the cryogenic arms were closed onto the 3rd stage valve plates. The gantry was moved over to shroud the launcher and allow access for mating the solid propellant boosters to the 1st stage, final checkout procedures, and as we shall see in a few moments in the next clip, assembly of the upper composite with the payload with Ariane. The last weather report before liftoff has just been coming in while we've been watching this film. Juan was listening in, so what's the situation?
The situation has been confirmed as go as far as meteorological criteria are concerned. The wind is below limits at different altitudes. Visibility is very good, 25 kilometers, and there's no risk of lightning or electrical storm.
That is reassuring indeed. 802 came in by air as usual, and we just saw offloading from the aircraft in the transport container, a quick road trip up to the CSG and into the S1 building for mechanical and electrical preparation and initial checkout. This lasts approximately 5 weeks in the S1 preparation phase. The satellite is coming down there, not onto its actual launch adapter, but a stand used during the preparation work.
Some additional mechanical activities involve alignment of instruments, mechanical deployment test of the antenna reflectors and of the solar panels before the spacecraft is put into a transport container,
in which it is moved across to the S3 building for fueling, mating with its adapter, encapsulation, transferred to the pad, hoisting up to the top of the launcher, and mating with the launcher.
This was done 5 working days ago.
And we're approaching the final phase of this negative count.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée.
We are about to enter the final 6-minute synchronized sequence.
Top à 0-6 minutes.
So we are now in the sequence. What has changed, Juan?
What has changed now is that all systems summarized here in the panel are participating in an automated way to the countdown, and particularly all launcher parameters are being monitored and controlled from the launcher control center by 2 computers running in parallel at only 1,000 meters from the launcher itself. Of course, the spacecraft being led here by Terry Edwards is participating in the countdown, and any of these systems, as soon as it is not ready for liftoff in 5 minutes now, would automatically stop the sequence.
That would mean a red, and what would happen then? We'd go back to...
2 minus 6 minutes and take the time needed to check for the anomaly and correct it before a new sequence could be restarted.
We have our final piece of film here, which was shot just 6 hours ago, with the withdrawal of the gantry from the launcher, leaving it cleared for fueling, and leaving the launcher anchored to the pad simply by the cryogenic arms and the clamps.
We have confirmation of 3rd stage topping up completed.
Note the weather conditions there. They haven't changed really one iota.
Ignition time loaded into the onboard computer.
Terry Edwards looking a little anxious. But then we are only 4 minutes from liftoff.
Intelsat 802 spacecraft on internal power.
And fueling of the 3rd stage continues, topping off, so that we lift off with the correct pressure in those LOX and LH2 tanks. Tension mounts here in Jupiter, in the CDL, and in, of course, all the ground tracking stations which are on full alert.
Hydrogen tank at flight pressure.
We could have perhaps a little preview of the liftoff sequence, Juan.
Yes, what we call T0 time means ignition of the 1st stage engines. And during as long as 3 seconds then, their performance is being checked by the ground computers before the order or the command of release of the clamps can be sent to the launch platform at +4 seconds. And only then the solid boosters are ignited for liftoff.
All steady on green. And as it seems to be necessary still at this time, a reminder to latecomers and others, quickly now, you can get back to your Jack Daniels later, but coming up, or rather going up in just a few moments, Ariane flight 96 with Intelsat 802.
Getting ready for a flight pressure set of the oxygen tank. Confirmed.
And we're going to take another close look at those cryogenic arms. Still topping off the third stage tanks. They'll open just 5 seconds before ignition. Two cameras taking this curious picture.
Yes, through these arms have been flowing as many as 10 tons of cryogenic propellants during the past 3 hours at very low temperatures, around -200 Celsius.
I noticed a vapor plume from the tower just now. We don't have a fuel leak, I hope.
Well, you shouldn't get nervous, Simon. This is normal. It's just the humidity in the air here in the Amazonian region.
I think we're all pretty nervous now as we come up to the last minute of a countdown, which has been running for 14 and a half hours.
DDO, attention pour au moins 1 minute. Top, à 0 moins 1 minute.
And we're into the last minute, and the launcher is on onboard power.
Approaching start of first stage servo motors. Confirmed.
We are, of course, reporting these events as they actually happen. And we're very nearly there.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final.
Final
10,
voice count.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage. Allumage des papes. Pression foyer normale. Début manœuvre, t'engage. Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
We have a nominal liftoff.
Tous les paramètres normaux.
From the stage 1 engines and the 4 solid propellant boosters.
Fin de manœuvre en roulis.
Which we shall be in
Arrêt de propulsion des papes.
very soon. We always have a very fast start with an Ariane 44P.
Pilotage et propulsion normal.
And a very bright one.
It's a real greyhound out of the starting gate.
Burn time of the solid boosters is very short, only 1 minute.
We should be dropping them any moment now, and they will fall back into the shallow water after they
Paramètre
go.
vol domino.
Yes.
Largage des 4 papes.
And we here in Jupiter are hearing Ariane as she flies literally overhead.
Passage lanceur
You
transsonique.
may just get a rumble through our mic.
The 4 boosters are falling down to the mangrove coastal area close to the pad and will be recovered tomorrow morning for technical expertise, not for reflight.
We're still tracking on cameras from a number of points round the launch pad, including the CDL itself.
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
And we're getting a steady flow of announcements from the DDO, confirming that all onboard parameters are correct, are nominal. And we'll explain in a little while how that information reaches the DDO, reaches the team here in Jupiter. Now, we have already had on our screen for some while
Manœuvre dogleg.
trajectory plot. which will be with us right through to separation of the payload. The nominal track of the launcher is displayed on the left of your screen, and the little circle and the cross are respectively the theoretical and actual position of the launcher. You will see that as we are now, Ariane is following the flight path strictly as scheduled. And on the right of the screen we have a data column. Juan?
Yes. Début de deuxième manœuvre en roulis.
Maybe we can start from top, mentioning that CP1 stands for main computer number 1, which is the one being used for tracking right now for processing of the radar measurements, and T stands for time since ignition. Just underneath is represented the tracking system being used right now, and it is radar Bretagne number 1, very close to the Kourou town here on a nearby hill. S stands for angle under which this radar antenna
Extinction du premier étage.
The vehicle.
And we just had confirmation of burnout of stage 1.
Séparation premier et deuxième étage, allumage second étage, pression foyer normale.
Separation of stages 2 and 3 and ignition of stage 2, everything nominal.
Yes, separation of stages 1 and 2.
And we have, we can take a little situation check here. After 4 minutes intermission, we are at an altitude of 91 kilometers and a speed of 2.7 kilometers per second. That's pretty fast already. And yes, we have, of course, burnt something like 270, 280 tons of propellant in the shape of the first stage and the solid propellant boosters, and part of the fuel load of stage 2 already.
Yes, in fact, the data about altitude and velocity are given on the two bottom lines of the screen.
And they're, in fact, the interesting ones to watch all the way through to separation. We're about to drop the fairing.
Largage de la coiffe.
It's done.
Yes, as we have crossed the dense layers of the atmosphere, you can see we are already more than 100 kilometers altitude. The protecting fairing is not needed anymore, and the Intelsat is already in contact with almost deep space.
Tous les paramètres second étage sont normaux.
And of course, it is in the interest of propulsion efficiency to drop any unwanted mass as soon as this becomes possible. A word now perhaps about the source of the data on which the DDO bases his announcements, which have been flowing steadily since liftoff.
Yes, all these data are being sent at high rate from the launcher itself and received right now by the Kourou telemetry station and processed. Some of the parameters are processed in real time, and this is why we can show this technical data on the right hand of
Extinction deuxième étage.
Now we have an important one.
Séparation deuxième étage, troisième étage.
And we have confirmation
allumage troisième étage.
Of correct burnout of stage 2,
normal.
separation of stages 2
Tous les
and 3,
paramètres normaux.
and ignition of the cryogenic propulsion system of the third stage.
As soon as the Kourou telemetry station will lose visibility of the launcher when it gets over the horizon, then the second so-called downrange station will take over, receiving the telemetry, and this station is in Brazil, and it will be sending part of the data in real time to Kourou so that mission control can have permanent coverage of the mission.
And in fact, we can plot Ariane's progress across the
Acquisition
Atlantic
par la station natale.
by the various switches from tracking station to tracking station, and we now have confirmation of acquisition by Natal, the Brazil station. And of course, with the commencement of the propulsion phase with stage 3, we've switched to cryogenic propulsion, and this has obviously meant
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
Chilling down the propellant circuits and the valves in preparation for ignition, a process which commenced shortly after liftoff. How is this in fact done, Juan?
Yes, cryogenic propulsion is one of the most efficient technologies known today, but it involves complexity of the engine itself because it's dealing with very low temperature propellant. So manipulating these fluids involves quite a detailed process, both before liftoff and during flight, to monitor this third stage engine correctly and to get it ignited at the right time.
I think we should come back to our customer for a moment, because Intelsat won't be with us for much longer. Intelsat in the shape of 802, I mean, of course. 802 will take the Intelsat fleet to 25 satellites in operational service. This total will go up to 26 with 803 is launched, also on Ariane in September. And there will in fact be 6 Series 800 spacecraft flown. Intelsat has a long history of space communications leadership, and this dates back to its formation in 1965. It still has the largest international network in terms of satellites and coverage, in the face of intensifying competition, of course. However, as Terry Edwards said when we talked to him yesterday, Intelsat has every intention of staying in business.
That's right.
So what is Intelsat?
Sorry, his deputy, Dave Griffiths, whom we hadn't seen before.
Indeed. Thank you. So what is Intelsat's strategy? How is the organization changing? How is it moving with the times? Not just by extending the term of office of its Director General, I feel.
Next to Dave Griffiths are other Intelsat people and also operational managers from Lockheed Martin, who is the manufacturer of the Intelsat 8 series. I would like to mention also the team from Lockheed Martin that is has been monitoring the satellite preparation campaign here in the payload processing facilities in Kourou, and that team has been led by Michael Callery, whom we don't see on the screens because he is sitting in a separate nearby building.
In S1, I believe, and of course the satellite personnel, both here and back stateside, their post-launch work will commence very shortly, if it hasn't commenced already. And as regards the continuation of an endless process, the Ariane mission on this flight will terminate a few minutes after separation with the avoidance procedure. But work will continue because by then preparation for the next launch will already have commenced.
Yes, I would say avoidance maneuver and also passivation of the
fin de visibilité par la station de Kourou.
Third stage of Ariane, so that this stage, during the time that it will stay in orbit and of course eventually fall down and burn in the atmosphere, but during the time the third stage stays in orbit, the Arianespace technique of emptying the tanks, of venting them, will avoid the two propellants getting together and creating an explosion with the generation of unnecessary debris. So the passivation maneuver is exactly to avoid this.
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
A word of the Ariane 502 launch campaign, the second Ariane 5 flight, upcoming in just a few weeks' time. We now have behind the trajectory plot a bit of film on this subject. The launch campaign, in fact, commenced
June 16.
9 days ago, yes, following the arrival of the launcher again on the Toucan on June 13th. So how is the campaign going ahead, Juan?
Well, it is now running very smoothly, following schedule, and the main stage has already been put in vertical position and flanked by the two solid propellant boosters, and also the upper stage and the vehicle equipment bay have been assembled. So far, so good for the second Ariane 5 test flight.
That is good news. Provisional launch date for 502 is, I believe, still end September?
That's right, yes.
Well, now, I don't want to alarm you.
Il reste environ 400 secondes de propulsion.
we have a dip in the trajectory and we are losing a bit of altitude.
Well, Simon, you know that this is not reason for getting nervous again. In fact, the intention here with this trajectory, which is a standard eastward trajectory on Ariane, is to get first through the atmosphere as quickly as possible with an almost vertical ascent phase. And then once we are without the drag of the atmosphere, the launcher is using some of the gravitational field of the Earth to gain velocity. So this is a way of optimizing
acquisition par la station d'ascension.
Acceleration stealing, you could call it.
Right.
Incidentally, it's always intriguing to watch the velocity figure. We're now on 6.9 kilometers per second, because knowing that we need nearly 10 kilometers.
And the launcher is being tracked by the Ascension Island tracking station.
Indeed, and we have a picture of the tracking station, very barren there. We know that the final figure we're aiming for orbit injection is almost 10 kilometers per second, and there always seems to be a tremendous scramble in the last moments of powered flight to achieve that figure. But it always comes good in the end.
These are still pictures that have been recorded in the Ascension Island telemetry station. As you can see, it's a very volcanic landscape over there.
Tous les paramètres sont
It's a
normaux.
British island in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean.
And it's not really a particularly favorable holiday resort.
Well, I wouldn't mind
It
working
would be
there for a
interesting
while.
to go there, but for the main family holiday, perhaps not. A word perhaps now of new business achieved by Ariane recently. A number of new contracts were signed during or close to the
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
Paris Air Show. These include Sirius 3, a direct-to-home satellite for the Norwegian company NSAB.
Fin de poursuite par la station de Natal.
And we've just lost tracking by the Natal station.
As foreseen.
Precisely on schedule. And another new contract was for the Telstar 6 spacecraft, a multi-mission satellite for Loral Skynet. The Loral long-term contract with Ariane was also extended. And of course, recent launch contracts booked by Ariane include XMM and Envisat. And as a European Space Agency man, Juan, these are very much your babies.
Very closely to my team in Ariane is the scientific team at the European Space Agency, and I think it's good news that there's now a confirmed date for the launch of XMM, the X-ray telescope, which is an Ariane 5 dedicated scientific payload to be launched in 1999. This is one of the cornerstones missions of
Il reste environ 200 secondes de propulsion.
Horizon 2000 program. And of course the other ESA launch that has been confirmed also for 1999 is the very heavy Earth observation mission called Envisat, which is planned to follow on the work presently done by the ERS series.
Well, in fact, Envisat with a liftoff mass of around 10 tons will most certainly be set a new record for Ariane payloads, because it's inconceivable that we shall have a larger payload booked on Ariane 5 before that one flies.
That's right. We're approaching now acquisition by the first station on the African continent. We're also approaching the end of third stage propulsion.
Yes, we've less than 2 minutes burn time with stage 3. And we've probably just time to take a look ahead to what will happen after separation of our passenger tonight, Intelsat 802. In other words, early orbit operations.
2 minutes de poussée.
Yes, Intelsat will very soon be picked up by its own tracking station network after separation from the Ariane vehicle. As soon as 40 minutes from liftoff, it should be acquired by the Perth station in Australia and soon thereafter by the Beijing station in China. Following that, there will be 3 apogee motor ignitions from the Intelsat spacecraft itself to transform the highly elliptical transfer orbit into a circular one. Intelsat is planning then to perform antenna deployments and most importantly payload in-orbit tests during the second half of July.
Tous les paramètres
That
sont
will then be
normaux.
followed by a drift to its final orbital position over the Pacific Ocean, and Intelsat expects to have this spacecraft ready for service end of August.
I think we should point out
Il reste
that
environ 1 minute de propulsion.
what remains of the
Tous les paramètres
third
sont normaux.
stage after separation also goes into geostationary transfer orbit, and that's where it stays until that orbit decays and it burns up. Because some people seem to have the impression that stage 3 goes into geostationary.
It does not. Does
no,
not.
there's no space debris problem there.
Acquisition par la station de Libreville.
Libreville acquisition, Libreville in Gabon,
Il reste 30 secondes de propulsion.
and 30 seconds to go on burn time for stage 3.
These are nice pictures of Libreville, which is also an equatorial site. Landscape reminds the landscape of French Guiana.
Indeed,
Hot and humid
and latitude very close.
to the equator. The teams at these
Extinction du 3e étage.
And we have shutdown, not burnout, but shutdown of stage 3. And
This is
we commence the pre-separation sequence.
city of Libreville, also on recorded pictures. The teams at the different tracking stations, or better telemetry receiving
Début de
stations,
manœuvre
are
d'orientation du
all
composite.
depending from Guyana Space Center management here.
And we're starting spin-up of a composite.
Flight director Claude Kievre from Ariane Espace.
Fin de visibilité par la station d'ascension.
Signal lost by Ascension Island. And we have
A steady rise of altitude right now. If you watch on the bottom right edge of the picture, 1 kilometer higher each second, and approaching.
or even better than that. And we're almost on the injection velocity.
Intelsat is about to get into geostationary transfer orbit and will make one turn around the Earth every 10.5 hours or so.
Début de la mise en spin.
Spin-up commenced.
Séparation Intelsat 802.
And we have it. Separation of Intelsat 802 now in independent orbit. Well, everyone is very happy in here.
Here's also Bill Bendon, Intelsat spacecraft project manager, very happy.
The smiles on the faces, the cigars will be coming out in a moment. But in fact, the Ariane launcher mission is not quite complete because we have to complete the avoidance and passivation tasks, which we mentioned earlier. And as we also said, the
Also Doug Conley from Intelsat, Neil Miles from Lockheed Martin are happy with the result.
And Terry Edwards will be leaving his colleagues in a moment to come to the microphone. We have a replay coming up in a second or two.
Allumage des papes. Pression foyer normale. Début manœuvre t'engage. Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
We have a nominal liftoff.
Tous les paramètres normaux.
From the stage 1 engines and the 4 solid propellant boosters.
Fin de manœuvre en roulis.
Which we shall... Well, the celebrations will be commencing very shortly, but...
One should say that part of the team is not finishing the task now. Some of them are starting. For instance, the Intelsat early orbit maneuver managers and their teams around the world. And also, of course, here at the spaceport, some of the teams involved with safety and...
Well, for example, the fire brigade will be on the pad within the hour from now. A happy sign from Terry Edwards.
Do you think he will be the first to speak? No.
No, I think...
Bonsoir.
And here we have Mr. Kievre. With injection of the Intelsat 802 spacecraft into its transfer orbit, Ariane has once again carried out its launch mission task successfully. From the precision of the launcher trajectory,
fin de mission lanceur,
which we observed during this flight, I'm not sticking my neck out very far.
Donc à tous de DDO,
If
fin
I
de la
say that
chronologie
orbit characteristics will
V096.
doubtless be good.
Les moyens sont remis à la disposition des adjoints.
Telemetry
Débriefage du
data
lancement
already to hand
demain en
indicates
salle
that
Max
satellite
Hauser
attitude
à
on
9h.
separation was entirely nominal. This is the 15th Intelsat satellite launched on Ariane. The first was lofted on an Ariane 1 in October 83 on flight L7 as part of the promotional program directed by the European Space Agency. Intelsat has so far ordered a total of 18 Ariane launches, of which 16 with Ariane Espace. Intelsat is without question our largest customer. It should also be noted that the first launch contract for Intelsat 507 on flight L7 was signed even before the very first Ariane launch, L1. Confidence and fidelity are the key words which describe our relations with this Intelsat organization. I'd like to take this opportunity to emphasize the expertise of the Intelsat launcher team, with which we have enjoyed extremely profitable technical relations for nearly 20 years. As an old hand, I'm thinking in particular of Mr. McGaskill, who was working with us right at the start of the Ariane program and who gave us much valuable help during the difficult times of these early days. This is the 5th launch of the year. It's also the 26th consecutive successful Ariane 4 launch and equals our previous record. So there's now a new record to beat. This excellent result is largely due to the industrial partners in the Ariane programs who, through Europe and also in French Guiana, manufacture the elements of the launcher
de leur demander de rester
with the requisite high level of quality. I would like to call on them to remain very vigilant, in particular regarding the processing
nécessaires et en particulier les anomalies considérées comme mineures.
Non-conformances, including those even
du
very
point de vue
small.
opérationnel, je voudrais faire remarquer que l'intervalle de temps entre
I'd also like to point out that the period separating the last two launches was
a
only
été de 22 jours
22 calendar days.
Cela confirme la capacité opérationnelle de notre système de lancement,
demonstrating
y compris bien entendu
the operational capacity of our launch system. This naturally includes the Guyana Space Center.
Intelsat 802, notre carnet
Following
de
the Intelsat
43 satellites à lancer.
802 launch, our order book contains 43 satellites to be placed into orbit.
L'activité de notre direction commerciale, c'est peut-être 44 demain. Mais peu importe,
This
l'essentiel
may
c'est
rise
que
to
depuis
44 in the
une
near
dizaine
future.
d'années, plus de 10 ans même, ce carnet de commandes se situe au niveau d'une quarantaine de...
For more than 10 years, our order book has been at a level close to
Et pour
40
éviter
satellites.
qu'il ne gonfle trop, nous allons essayer cette année de faire 11 lancements.
In this context, our target is to make 11 Ariane 4 launches this year. The next launch is scheduled for August 7th,
et un H0
with
au
liftoff
petit matin du 8 août.
in the early hours of August
On
8th.
essaiera d'en faire un deuxième,
The passenger will be
également en août,
Intelsat
comme on en a
6.
fait 2 en juin.
To conclude,
En juillet, on entreprend une vaste opération de maintenance préventive sur les rails du portique.
we have a heavy maintenance program
Donc,
in the month of
voilà pour
July.
notre activité à court terme. Et pour
So
terminer,
much
je
for
voudrais dire
our
quand
short-term
même, sans vouloir
activities.
empiéter sur les responsabilités de l'Agence spatiale européenne et du CNES, je voudrais dire
To
quand même
conclude,
que
and
nous
with no
sommes
desire to
très
impinge on the
heureux
responsibilities
de
of the
constater
European Space
que
Agency
le
and CNES,
lanceur Ariane 502
I'm happy
est
to
ici
observe the
sur le
presence
site et que la campagne de
of the Ariane
lancement
502 launcher on the
est
site,
bien entamée.
and
Donc,
the fact
toutes les
that the
conditions sont
launch
réunies
campaign
pour que le
has
deuxième
commenced.
vol de
All the conditions
qualification
required for
d'Ariane 5
the
ait
second
lieu
qualification flight of the Ariane
dans
5
les
launcher
conditions prévues.
to take place
et
in the
très
near
prochainement.
future
Nous
have
attendons
now been
tous
acquired.
cet événement avec beaucoup d'espoir,
We look forward to this
de
event with
confiance,
high hopes and
mais je
confidence,
dois dire aussi avec un tout petit peu d'impatience.
and also perhaps with
Voilà,
a small
j'en
measure
ai
of
terminé.
impatience.
Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you for your attention.
Bon, je voudrais passer la parole à Monsieur Terry Edwards.
I'd like to hand over now to Terry Edwards, representing the Intelsat launcher team.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in Kourou. Good evening to visitors in Washington, D.C., my friends and colleagues there. A special good evening to my family in Washington. The launch success which you witnessed this evening was the result of lots of hard work, professionalism, and cooperation on the part of a very magnificent team. This team consists of members from CSG, Ariane, all of the industrial organizations which build this wonderful Ariane 4 launch vehicle, the team from Lockheed Martin, and Intelsat. Pierre Rivardière asked me to mention CSG first this time. Now, the work with the Intelsat 802 spacecraft, all of that work is now focused at the Intelsat Launch Control Center in Washington. Best of luck to my colleagues there. This is Intelsat's second launch this year. We hope to be back to French Guiana and to launch 2 more spacecraft, hopefully before the end of this year, with the same magnificent launch team. Once again, on behalf of Intelsat, thank you very much for this evening's success, and see you again soon. Thank you.
Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage. Allumage des papes. Pression foyer normale. Début manœuvre t'engage. Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
We have a nominal liftoff.
Tous les
clean
paramètres
burn
normaux.
from the stage 1 engines and the 4 solid propellant boosters. It looks just as good third time round, I think you will admit, Juan.
Yes, I do, and if you allow me, I would like to say, especially to those who had to watch this from distant sides, that we really hope that you can all come here one day to visit this beautiful country of French Guiana in the Amazon.
And I will certainly second those sentiments, Juan. This brings us up to the end of tonight's launch. We, as always, have been happy to have you with us. We invite you cordially to join us again in August for Flight 98, which will be carrying Panamsat 6 for the Panamsat company. Until then, this is Good Night from Kourou, French Guiana, from... and Simon Hayes, and it was a pleasure for me to Juan. Good night.